What exactly is the condition trench foot?
Yeah, it's the classical thing that people think of, isn't it, of the First World War. It relates to the trenches, trench foot, and certainly it was one of the hallmarks of disease in the trenches. Interestingly, it didn't originate from the trenches. There are descriptions from Napoleon's retreat from Moscow, which almost certainly are of trench foot. Basically, what the condition is, it occurs when the feet are cold and wet and continually so. They can't be dried. And exactly what you would expect in the trenches. There was mud, there was water, there was no changing facilities. For days, weeks on end, men just had their clothes on, their socks on, their boots on, and they were wet and cold. It particularly occurred in the winter as well too. And of course footwear in those days, and of course in Napoleon's days also, was poor. It wasn't waterproof, it wasn't like modern mountaineering gear and so on. So it was really prolonged exposure to cold and wet. That would cause maceration of the skin, the kind of change you get if you lie in the bath too long, your skin goes white and wrinkly. So a sort of extreme version of that. That would lead to blistering, fissures, breaks in the skin, infection, and if it was the winter in particular and it wasn't treated, or the boots stayed on, the socks stayed on, even gangrene, shortage of blood supply to the foot could occur, and gangrene, and even amputations.
Am I imagining this would be really painful for the
Yeah,
person
I think
suffering?
so. I very much so. I mean, the kind of equivalent in modern times, maybe the kind of infections and ulcers you get in diabetic feet, but in people with diabetes, their sensation is reduced and their feet are numb. But no, these men had previously healthy feet, so I think these could be intensely uncomfortable and intensely painful, and as I mentioned, could on occasions result in amputation. Interestingly, although we think of it as a First World War disease predominantly, as well as occurring before, it has occurred since. It did occur in milder cases in the Falklands War. Again, the Marines were landed on the Falklands, yomping across, no camping facilities, changes of clothes for several days. And milder cases did occur there. And even today, there is a modern equivalent at Glastonbury. We've all heard of the Glastonbury concerts, famous for the mud and the rain and so on. And I think most people who go there now take their wellies, and that's fine. But if you're just moving around in trainers, you can very rapidly get totally soaking wet, cold feet. And the podiatrists in the medical centre at Glastonbury will tell you they do see early trench foot, not as severe and not needing surgery or anything like that, but it does occur today. Later on in the war, perhaps from about 1916 onwards, it became apparent that, as well as being a major problem, intensely uncomfortable, painful and problematic to the men, this was actually having a serious effect on the fighting resources, that large numbers of men were having to be withdrawn from the front. And it was at that stage, perhaps callously, the army began to get interested in what can we do about this. And foot inspections then began to occur, and good officers, good sergeants would actually once a day get the lads, sitting down and take their boots and socks off, let's have a look at them. And if there were early changes and problems, get them off to see the medic. And there were also campaigns later in the war at home for women to knit socks for the troops. And instead of just sending out food and tobacco and stuff like this, later on in the war, newly knitted socks, so the men had spare pairs, was quite a common thing to send out.
Very interesting, thank you.